In this lesson, you'll talk about forks and double attacks. Well, not quite forks in the kitchen, although I have to say there is a lot of similarity between forks in chess and forks in the kitchen. By the kitchen fork we use to pick up a piece of meat or vegetable or potato, or several of them usually at the same time. In chess we use forks to attack at least two of the opponent's pieces at the same time. Let's see in practice how that works. We will have 20 examples to demonstrate the forks. Here is the first one. In this position, black has visible material advantage at the moment, having still the queen on the board, while white only has a knight other than pawns. Nevertheless, thanks to a fork, white can win black's queen right away and then reach a winning endgame. Try to think what may be the winning move here for white that creates that devastating fork for black. And the move is moving the knight right in the middle of the board to d5 and saying check to the black king. Now the black king is busy to move out of the check, and then the white knight is ready to capture the black queen. And now it's clear that white is who is ahead. And the win is only a matter of time. By the way, I'd like to point out right from the beginning that the knight is the optimal forking piece, because it can jump over pieces and it has that ability very conveniently to attack two or sometimes even more pieces at the same time. Let's continue with a couple of more knight forks. In the position on the board, it's black's turn for a change. As you can see, the black knight at the moment is targeting two of white pawns. This is a fork already in itself. But now it's black's turn and black needs to make a choice. Which white pawn to capture? Both are unprotected. Therefore, black would win a pawn with either capture. However, one of the two is much better than the other. If white would capture the pawn on c4 and give a check, not bad. However, black can do much better, namely capturing that other pawn on e4. In this case, black not only won a pawn, but at the same time created a new fork to the white king, and at the same time, the white bishop. The white king is too far away from the bishop to protect it. Therefore, after the white king gets out of the check, black simply captures the white bishop for nothing. And let's move on to example number 3. Here we are. At this moment, black is a pawn ahead, but white has a choice to right now capture the pawn on b7, free of charge. But this reminds me of the famous advice, when you see a good move, look for a better one. And in this case, indeed, there is a better choice, namely, to create a fork that will win a much more valuable piece of the opponent, a rook instead of just a pawn. Again, the black king is in check, is forced to move out, and then the white knight can capture the black rook, winning serious material advantage. You may have noticed that so far all our examples included a check in order to win an opponent's piece. Oftentimes, forks involve checks, but I have to stress not always. In the meantime, we'll follow up looking at various examples on how the different pieces, the queen, the bishop, the rook, the pawn, even the king, can create a fork. And for now, we'll continue with examples where a check is involved. Then towards the end of the lesson, we'll see several examples. Then there is no check involved by creating the fork. Here is the next example, where the star is the queen. This is a roughly symmetrical position, with each side having pawns on the same files, the same number of them, 5 each. Each side having a rook, symmetrically positioned, and the queens are also in a similar position. The big difference is that it's white's turn, and that gives white the opportunity to win black's rook. Try to stop for a moment and figure out what should be that simple but very effective move. And the answer is moving the queen to d5, checking black's king. Again, the important part is that we didn't only give a check, which in itself wouldn't mean much, but at the same time we attack black's rook in the corner as well. The problem here is that black doesn't have the time to move away his attacked rook from a8, because the king is busy in responding to the check. Whether black moves his king out of the check to f8 or h8, or blocks the check with the queen, in either case, white will choose to capture the rook and win serious material again. You may wonder, why wouldn't white capture the black queen, since the queen is a lot more valuable piece than a rook? Of course, the answer to that is that then black would also capture the white queen, and white would not win any material. That would only be an exchange, a trade of queens. And let's see a very similar but little different position with several major differences. The first difference is that it's black's turn, not white's. Other than that, the position is quite similar. But this small difference is a major difference. Here, black can do pretty much the same or very similar as what white did to black in the very last example. And the answer here is, again, the queen moving to a center square, giving a check, while at the same time, in the other direction, the queen attacks the rook. White being in check is unable to defend the rook in the corner, must respond to the check, whether by blocking the check with one of the pawns, or moving the king out. The black queen will capture that rook in the corner. Let's see another example where a queen is the star. In this position, it's clear that black has one piece that's kind of out of place, and that is this knight on a5. Knights generally don't belong on the edge of the board. The reason why? Because their mobility is greatly limited there, compared to being in a central square, such as d5, or e5 for example in this case. The other problem that black faces is that that very knight, on a5, is on an unprotected square. I think I mentioned that several times in previous lessons, and I promise you, I will keep mentioning it over and over. It's a very important element to be aware of. Which pieces are unprotected or unprotected squares. In this case, in fact, black has a number of pieces on unprotected squares, besides the knight. Also, the rook on c8, as well as the queen on e7, are on unprotected squares. And in addition, the little pawn on a7. On the other hand, in comparison, you can see that, for example, the black pawn on b7 is guarded by the queen, as well as the knight. Oftentimes, this fact that if a piece is on an unprotected square, it gives an option, an opportunity to the opponent to create some kind of tactic, such as the fork, to win one of those pieces. In this case, the best choice for white is to move the queen to h5, attacking not only the black king, but the black knight all the way at the other end of the board at the same time. Just to give you an example, if white would, for example, go and attack the black knight from b5, in that case it would only attack the knight, and the knight would safely, for example, retreat to c6 and be safe. Therefore, it is crucial that we create multiple attacks. That's what forks are. Not leaving the opponent the opportunity, the time to run away, beat the attacked, or the aimed piece. And let's move on to a new piece. Now the hero will be the rook. And again, the goal is to attack two of the black pieces simultaneously. You may wonder about the move, like moving the rook to d6 to attack black's knight and pawn at the same time. However, don't get confused, something like this would not work at all. It's true the black knight is under attack. But for example, if the king moves and protects the knight, it would be, of course, a very bad choice to capture this pawn on b6, because the black pawn would then capture the rook. Let's go back to the starting position, where white has, on the other hand, a much better way to attack two black pieces. And again, white gives a check, keeping black real busy, getting out of it. And then the rook would simply pick up the unprotected bishop on c8. And let's see another example, with the rook being the star. In this position, black seemingly has a super dangerous strat. And that is to checkmate with the rook on d1 and give a back rank checkmate. White seems to be in serious trouble in trying to defend against it. The white rook is unable to come back and guard the d1 square. Obviously, pawns don't move backwards, they can definitely not help. And moving the king towards g1 doesn't help either, because the black bishop guards the two potential escape squares of the king, and the game would still end in a similar way by checkmate with the rook coming down. However, white can save the game and in fact reach a winning position after giving the check with the rook. So for the moment being, black obviously cannot give checkmate coming down with his rook to d1, because it's the black king that's under direct attack. The black king needs to move out, and then the white rook is ready to capture the bishop. White didn't only win a bishop in this case, but just as importantly, created safety for his own king. Now, After the rook check on d1, the king can simply escape on h2 and be safe. And with white having 3 passed pawns on the queen side, white has excellent chances to win the game. And the last example, with the rook being the star, here we are. In this position, black has clear material advantage, having an extra knight. And here, white is able to exactly win that knight, thanks to the little pawn on g6 that is guarding the h7 square. Therefore, the white rook is able to come right there to h7. Check the black king. The black king obviously cannot capture the rook because the pawn protects. And when the king makes its only move, then the rook already will capture that knight. And it's only black who needs to worry about saving the game, not white. And let's move on to the next piece, the bishop. In this position, black is ahead. Black has an extra rook, versus white having an extra bishop and 1 pawn. Black is in a clearly better position, yet it would be a huge mistake to capture the pawn on b2. Why? Because it would allow a bishop fork by coming to d4, attacking the black king, checking it on one hand, and on the other hand, attacking black's rook. And then, again as usual, when black gets out of the check, the white bishop captures the black rook, leaving white with a winning endgame. And the second example, with the bishop forking. Here we go. In this position, black again, as in one of the previous examples, has his knight on h5, kind of out of play. What black should do in this position, move the knight more towards where action is, towards the middle of the board, and in fact give a check, and then, when the following move, perhaps capture white's bishop as well. On the other hand, in this game, black made a mistake, and pushed his pawn up to play f6, offering a trade of pawns between white's e5 pawn and the black pawn on f6. And here, instead of capturing black's pawn on f6, white can do much better. Namely, on the vacant g6 square, the white bishop is able to give a check, not only attacking the black king, but the black knight at the same time. Black no longer has the time to move his knight away from that unfortunate square because needs to respond to the check first. Once that happens, bishop captures knight, and white won material. And now let's see how even a little pawn can create a fork. For example, here, in this position, white can push up the pawn to e5, attacking the black king and knight at the same time. Of course, important to remember that this is only possible because the white rook from e1 is guarding that pawn. Therefore, the black king cannot capture the pawn. And let's see another similar example. Hopefully you can figure out the solution in that one. Here we go. The black rook from d6 is attacking the white knight on d3. Nevertheless, white does not need to go on the defense, but can instead win black's rook. And the move is pushing the pawn up to c5, checking black's king. Again, important, the white knight from d3 is protecting that pawn, otherwise, the whole idea would not work. And when the king moves out, pawn takes rook, and even though black can also capture a piece, it's only a little pawn, which is much less of value, then a rook, as we know. And finally, let's move on to forks that do not involve checks. Obviously, the king cannot give checks. So let's start right with the kings, because even the king can give a fork. In the position that we see on the board right now, in fact, it's the white king who is in check. However, instead of just worrying of moving out of the check somewhere, anywhere, white, finding the correct move, will create a fork at the same time as moving out of the check. And the correct square is to move to e3, which attacks two important black pieces simultaneously, the rook and the knight. One of the two will be lost. Let's see some of the other pieces how they can create forks without attacking the opponent's king. In this position, black has two rooks versus white's queen. As you can see, the two black rooks are both on undefended squares, and the white queen has an excellent option to attack both of those rooks. By moving the queen to c6, black is in serious trouble, and for example, after the rook retreats to the back rank, the white queen will capture the rook. And now, let's see the rook. Here we go. Again, an almost symmetrical position, but white is ahead by being the one controlling the open D file. Thanks to that, the white rook is able to move into the 7th rank and attack the two black bishops that are both on unprotected squares. If black moves away the bishop from b7, white would just go ahead and capture the other one. If we go back to the starting position and after rook d7, black, on the other hand, moves the bishop to f6. Then it would be a mistake to capture that same bishop, because black would also get to capture a bishop of white's. Therefore, the correct move is, after bishop f6, to first capture that bishop on f6 to trade bishops. Now, if the black pawn recaptures, then rook takes already, leaving white with an extra bishop. Or, if black tries to be real tricky right now, and plays bishop to c6, then white would play rook c7, again attacking that bishop, and now either the black bishop runs away, in which case, so will the white bishop, or, if the black pawn takes the bishop, then rook takes c6, and again, white is a bishop ahead. And let's move on to the bishop. In this example, we'll see the goal being only to win one little pawn. Remember, it's usually a good idea to win any piece of your opponent's if it doesn't involve you losing some of yours. In this case, the bishop is the hero that can accomplish this goal. By moving the bishop to d4, white attacks a real valuable piece, the knight, and at the same time, the black pawn on b6. Naturally, black will want to save his knight. But, in that case, the bishop is capturing the pawn, and white is a pawn ahead. And let's see about the knight. Without giving any checks, how we create a fork. In this example, black has two rooks that the white knight can attack at the same time. By moving the knight to the middle of the board again, to d5, attacking two rooks, white is gaining material. Only one of them can escape at the time. For example, after the best choice of black, when one rook would go and protect the other, knight would capture the rook would capture the knight. White would still gain material because, as we know, rooks are worth 5 points, clearly more valuable than knights, which are only worth 3 points. And let's see the little pawn. This is a very typical example, happens in many games, because this is such a natural developing square for the black bishop and knight. Be aware of such and similar pawn forks. Happens all the time in all kind of openings. Again, similarly to some of the previous examples, it's crucial that there is a pawn that's protecting that e5 pawn. The pawn on d4 is guarding the one on e5. If the one on d4 wouldn't be there, then black could simply capture the pawn for free. In this case, it's not for free at all, because the pawn from d4 now will capture that bishop, leaving white with clear material gain. And here comes our last example that will give you an example of a double attack, which is kind of like a fork, but a little bit different. Here the difference is that we're really attacking one piece and the second threat, that is to checkmate. So instead of attacking 2 pieces, we focus on threatening to give checkmate and attacking another piece at the same time. We're not gonna see many examples of this in this lesson, but we'll come back to it at a future lesson. It's a very important topic. I just wanted to make sure I introduced this idea to you as well. And here it comes. The queen moves to e4, creating a battery between the white bishop and queen, threatening to checkmate on h7. And while black is busy guarding against that, for example, by pushing the pawn up, the white queen is free to capture black's rook in the corner. Naturally, black did not have the time to move the rook away from the danger, because then immediate checkmate would have followed. Thank you for listening to this lesson. Forks are one of the most important tactical themes, and we'll get back to it in several more lessons. Use it in your upcoming games. Have fun. Until next week, bye-bye.
Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to give us a like and subscribe.